So, guys, here we go. I saw this. I think I saw this myself, actually, instead of getting it sent to the Discord. But it's from Ben Shapiro, and it's called Do Not Take This Red Pill. I don't know exactly what it's about. You know, I don't pre-watch. Oh, excuse me. But it seems like Ben Shapiro's finally standing up to the red pill. I know some people will respond like, no, he's made criticisms of them. Yeah, he's made very, very incredibly light criticisms in a way where, you know, despite the fact that red pill is antithetical to his values, he still goes real easy on it. Meanwhile, if you're a 15-year-old non-binary person on TikTok, he will just destroy you, right? So it kind of shows where his priorities lie. And on top of that, people in his sphere have been running defense. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, they gave Andrew Tate a chance to lie about his situation. And I want to be very clear, if you're somebody that's like, well, I want to wait for the court to be over, that's fine. But both of them gave him a platform to come on and say, oh, I'm not even being charged with anything other than TikTok. So it really is just like an incredible defense run at this point. So anyway, I'm curious about what Mr. Shapiro has to say. Let's go.
The far-right movement that focuses in on saying the...
Sorry.
Oh, folks, there's something called the red pill movement.
Is
sort
there?
of a far-right movement that...
Thanks for being 2 years late to the party, Ben.
...focuses in on saying the unsayable. And now many of the red-pilled have taken the position that it's bad for men to get married. A fascinating debate has broken out about the value of marriage. It's really interesting. So there are a bunch of people on...
Well, is this like a new thing?
...the so-called red-pilled right who have now suggested that marriage is bad for men, that men should not get married. Now, the case that they're making is not the liberal feminist case that basically men are useless and terrible. And
well, no, they're taking this case that men are better than women. And I mean, I don't even know the argument, but I know the argument. Hey, what's up, Rion? How you doing, brother? I don't know the argument, but I know the argument. Their argument is men are better than women. They provide more value because they make the money. They should be able to do whatever they want. They should be untethered, and they should be able to fuck as many girls as possible. That's going to be the argument. Like, I got to tell, right? For me, I think marriage is great. As a man, are there cravings? Obviously, I'm morbidly obese. No, but are there cravings? Absolutely. Like, of course. There's times where I'm like, oh, you know, I think back to my heyday, and I'm like, oh, man, you know, I'm 33 years old. I'm doing better than I ever have. It'd be cool to, you know. But they're not worth how destructive it would be to my marriage. And the reality is the benefit of my marriage, more than anything else for me, is that I've exponentially grown as a person into somebody that I'm almost proud of being. And so marriage is very, very powerful, at least for me. I found somebody who's been able to grow and build with me, and sex is nothing compared to that.
And a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle or anything like that. The case that they are making is that the stakes of marriage have been changed by things like NoFault Divorce, custody arrangements, the child support payments and all the rest, spousal support. That basically the legal regimen has made it
all
not
things that like men can benefit from if the woman makes more money. So who cares?
Not a bargain for men to get married. Now, I agree with the critique of all of those policies. I think no-fault divorce is a disaster area. I think
it's not. No-fault divorce allows you to divorce if you're in a situation where you're like, well, in a situation where you're potentially abused. Or where if you were just unhappy, and I think it's okay to leave somebody if you're unhappy. I don't know. That's like a hot take. You know, I would argue that forcing people to stay in divorces that they're not happy with are going to create more divorces in the future where people aren't happy, because what's happening is you get married, you stay with somebody that you're miserable with, and you have kids. Those kids look at the way that your relationship dynamic operates, and then they try to imitate that. And then they imitate that. And then they end up becoming in a miserable marriage, and the cycle continues. You're going to see more abuse in marriages where people are not compatible. It's just not a good thing. Instead of trying to tell people, like, yeah, you can walk away, and that's okay, but you should try to be very amicable about your raising of your child together. That's very important. I think that's the most important part, because there's so many people that'll get divorced and then they'll use their kids as a bargaining chip, and they'll just attack each other using their kids, and that puts them in a horrible situation. And I just think that would be a better way to go.
I think that the child custody arrangements that basically always go to mom no matter what, that is a serious problem. When you shift the incentive structure, there's a reason why the majority of divorces, the vast majority of divorces, are now initiated by women.
I mean, this is a real question. Like, who should get? I mean, there's a 50-50. The kid goes with the mom or the dad. Which one would you choose? Personally, honestly, if a dad gets their kid, God bless. Like, I have no problem with that. But I also understand why you would prefer to have the kid go to the mom. I feel like moms are better caretakers for kids than dads. That doesn't mean a dad can't be a good caretaker. That doesn't mean we can't socialize men to be better. But I mean, I know conservatives are very into the idea that men and women are fundamentally different, and they have fundamental like strengths and weaknesses. And one of those strengths of women is being able to, well, raise kids for whatever reason. They just seem to be, when it comes to the emotional aspect, I suppose, they seem to be pretty decent with that part, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm not seeing it necessarily as a negative that women are getting the children. I think if you're a man, you want your kids, you should fight for it, absolutely, and you should get an equal chance. But I also think that the majority reason that kids go to women is because men don't want their fucking kids. I mean, I really think that that's a big part of it as well. We kind of pretend that it's not, but I think it's kind of a big part of it. So, yeah.
That is not because in the past, women were wildly abused, and today they are wildly liberated. What that really is when you shift the incentive structure, and it turns out that all the risk is now taken by men, women are going to be the ones who actually activate and push that divorce button.
What risk is taken by men? Is my question. Like, I'm not understanding. I understand that if the man engages in a relationship and they make more money at the start, oh Jesus, this is so annoying. That, like, yeah, that is going to be a bigger risk for the guy. Of course, anybody really. But I feel like most marriages aren't the guy's doing super well and the girl is doing horrible. Most marriages are people who start in the same spot, which is usually with close to nothing or on a similar spot. And then they build and they grow together. Okay. They build and then they grow together. And then, you know, the two of them are going to sacrifice for certain things to build a family together, and then they kind of come out the other end, right? So,
however, the red pilled have taken
if you had a lot of money, you get a prenup.
One step further, and now they're telling young men you should not get married. It's too dangerous to get married. Don't get married. That's foolish. That's foolish. So let's go through some of these arguments because they become very popular on the right. So let's start with Pearl Davis. So Pearl Davis is an anti-feminist who has become pretty popular these days. A lot of people label her sort of a female Andrew Tate, although without the checkered past. And here is Pearl Davis talking about marriage.
The TradCons, Daily Wire, conservatives are
just be very clear. None of these, like, this woman has never been in a relationship. Most of the people in the manosphere have never been married or in a relationship. So what they say about relationships is irrelevant.
Saying that Pearl's just a doom.
It's like a fat person giving you fucking dieting advice.
And gloomer who lies about stats, just focuses on the negatives, never the positives. And all the men complaining are just crybabies. And so one day he comes home and he finds out that his wife had called the police on him and told them that the first time they hooked up 10 years ago, he had quote unquote raped her. And the truth of the matter is, when a man has children, they're not his kids. A man has no way to have children.
I'm confused. So is this an individual instance of like a guy and a girl having a bad marriage and then she lied about getting sexually assaulted or something by him? Is that the argument? Okay. I mean, I'm sure stuff like that happens, but they're usually not the general, you know.
And those kids be actually his. They're always hers. Because the courts give the women custody 90% of the time.
Yeah, they give men custody, I think, 90% of the time when men actually fight for it. So just to be clear. Okay.
And rich men are really the only ones that have the money to fight it and the time. So, I ask the Daily Wire, Jeremy Boeing, Matt Walsh.
That might be true. I think that there's also... People need to understand, like, most of the time when these things are happening... It's not like a 1-to-1 ratio where the guy wants his kid just as much of the time as the girl does. I think a lot of the times, and I'm not even talking about marriages, but a lot of times women want to be more present for their kids than men, generally speaking. Of course there's good men, but the person that's going to leave is going to be the man more than the woman. And the reason is because when you're growing a baby inside of you, a fetus, it's more alive and it's more of a thing or more of a person to you as a woman than it is to a man who hasn't engaged in any bonding time yet. There's no bonding time for a man and their baby until it comes out. And so that's one of the factors as well that I think you should keep in mind.
Is this just crybabies? Are they just they're cry?
Also, if your whole fucking argument is that men are the decision makers, men are the leaders, then men should have made the better decision for what woman they were going to fucking marry. I'm not even trying to be an asshole, but like if you're going to sit here and put all the weight on men to make all the right decisions, and they're the ones that are supposed to be doing that, then they should have picked better. That's your logic, not mine. I think it's a very complicated situation. Men should have just picked better, right? Like, men are the fucking big boss mans making the right calls. They should have made the right call.
Baby, weak men who don't man up and want to risk that. So, it's interesting because instead of demanding that the laws change and demanding women face repercussions for doing this stuff, you guys demand that men need to step up and take part in a system that discriminates against them.
Shut up. Like, well, you're dumb and you have nothing productive to talk about. Listen, here's the thing that's funny to me is that the reality is, women will tend to get primary custody of your kid. The dad's still allowed to see their kid and they still get visitation. And if they continue to visit their kid, they can advocate for more and they can be part of their kids' lives. A lot of these men don't want that. They don't want to be part of their kids' lives. They want to complain about it. They want to seem like a fucking victim so that losers like Pearl will fucking suck them off and go, wow, you must be the victim. But Pearl comes from a fucking rich daddy family. She's had nothing. She's had no struggles or anything in her life that's going on. Like, well, just shut the fuck up.
You say, oh, find a girl that prays. She won't do it.
What?
And I had this thought too.
You should stop
until
having
I
those.
found a Muslim girl that did the same thing. I found a Christian girl that did the same thing. I found a Catholic girl. It's happening all over, whether you want to believe it or not.
What's happening all over? That there are some bad women across different cultures? Yeah, there's bad men across cultures too. Who gives a shit? I don't care about bad people. I mean, they're bad. Oh, yeah, did you know that this person did a bad thing? Yeah, people do bad things. That's not generally what's happening. Like, generally speaking, women aren't marrying men to try to take their money 20 years from now. That's just a stupid thought if you have it. You're an idiot if you think that. And you're probably like 20 years old. That's not happening. Do divorces get messy? Sure. And men tend to explore outside their relationship more than women. And men tend to emotionally check out of relationships before women do. And men tend to be fine with dealing with bullshit at home. I mean, honestly, I could see as a man who's in a miserable, I'm not in a miserable relationship, but I could see a man being miserable because why, if you're a man and you're in a woman and you're in an unhappy marriage, right? Let's say there's a guy and there's a girl in an unhappy marriage, right? What is each of those people contributing? They're both probably working. So the guy's contributing money, of course, and the girl's probably contributing money. But what else is the woman doing? She's probably cooking. She's probably cleaning. She's probably doing the lion's share of taking care of the kids. She's probably doing most of the things that you have to do when it comes to taking care of the house, the home, the children, the everything. And the guy's going to work and he's coming home and he's maybe throwing around a fucking baseball. He's not doing nearly as much. And so obviously if I'm the fucking woman in the relationship where I'm basically to some extent some kind of a slave, where I have more responsibilities than this guy, I'm more likely to get fucking divorced and to initiate a divorce. That's just what's going to happen. On top of that, men tend to be able to just fuck and like have sex with with less connections, whereas a woman wants to have more intimacy. A woman can't have intimacy if she's in a marriage with somebody else, so she has to break it off. It makes perfect sense why a woman would want to initiate divorce. You guys acting like it's this fucking top secret thing. It's not.
It is happening. I don't care about your religion. I don't care about your church. This happens everywhere.
Okay, so the argument that she's making against it, all these marital policies, those are correct arguments, and nobody is disregarding the pain of men who have been wrongfully victimized under these circumstances where the incentive.
I'm sure that happens, but here's the thing: there's no policy that's ever going to exist that's going to be perfectly fair for everybody because we're a society of 300 million people. I'd argue that the policies that we have now are better overall than they would be if they were removed. Right? Are there men that get taken advantage of by the system? 1,000%. Should we figure out ways to fix that? 1,000%. Does that mean we should get rid of NoFault Divorce? No, you're a fucking moron if you think that. Like, that's what it comes down to. But that's the thing. There's nothing you'll ever implement is going to be 100% perfect. That's just how the world is. That's why there's literally a saying called "No good deed goes unpunished." Where do you think that comes from?
structure is completely stacked against them. That is true. However, the benefits of marriage are still unbelievable. It does matter who you marry. To pretend that there is no difference between the person that you marry, that it's happening with Christians and Muslims, and it's all the same, that's statistically untrue. There are things that you can do to mitigate against the risk of divorce.
Yeah,
and the person that you marry
if you're in a religious family, just hate your wife until they say they don't get a divorce anymore. That seems to be, because that's religion is unfortunately very regressive when it comes to women's rights. So
the chief mitigation. The truth is that in the Jewish community, we always have a backup plan in the sense that every marital contract is a prenup. Every marital contract is a prenup, right?
That might not be a bad idea, depending on what that means. Like, figure out how you're going to split assets before you get divorced, I guess. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad idea. Okay.
A Jewish ketubah is a prenup. It guarantees certain levels of spousal support, for example.
Okay, that's fair.
If you give a get, then it makes prior arrangements and all the rest. But one of the throwing out the baby with the bathwater is not the solution. So how about both? How about we revise the system of law? But also, in the meantime, you do need to find a spouse and get married to her. And if
it's haram to hit your wife, okay. Well, I mean, there's countries where any religion is the primary religion, but like Islam is the primary religion where they throw acid on women and like nobody gives a shit. What the fuck am I getting? Okay, there's religion in general is not being is being used to promote abuse, regardless of the religion. Like, let's just be clear.
What it requires for you to feel comfortable doing that is to shift away from the state mandated law and toward a contract arrangement. Then do that as well. Right? We can have churches that sponsor that sort of thing, because the truth is that those are enforceable contracts in court very often. The pre-custody arrangements and all the rest of that sort of thing. I want to go through some of the stats with regard to the benefits of marriage, because I think that it's also possible to exaggerate how bad things are for men. That doesn't mean they aren't really bad for men.
Yes, that's the entirety of what Red Pill is. It is exaggerating how bad things are for men. There are issues, but it's exaggerating how bad things are for men. And then instead of trying to lift men up, they're trying to bring women down to the way that those men feel. That's it. There's no building in the manosphere. Yeah, it's like, go to the gym. Yeah, go to the gym. Great. That's not fucking advice on how to be a more emotionally intelligent person and how to be a better husband for your wife. It's always about breaking the woman down to put them in a subservient role to the man and tell them that they have to adhere to certain boundaries and they have to endure abuse and they have to do all this shit, rather than explaining to men that you need to come to the table with more shit. Stop being a pussy and come to the table with more than your fucking deadbeat dad did. Like, why are you trying to model yourself after your fucking father that left your mother? Like, rise to the occasion.
Who end up divorced, or that women aren't divorcing men at an incredibly high rate overall, or the women aren't initiating the vast majority of divorce. Like, again, I agree with many of the critiques of current marital law.
They are initiating the divorce, but that doesn't mean that they're the reason that the divorce is happening in the first place. Just to be clear.
I agree with a lot of that stuff. The problem is that when you take it so far that you say that the solution for men is to not get married, now what you have done is you've created a second order effect where unmarried men become actual menaces. Okay, the reality is that men channel their aggressive drives toward building, or they channel it toward destroying.
Yeah, their wives,
And a system in which women are unmarried and men are unmarried, that's something that the left wants. And if you acquiesce in that,
I don't know if the left wants that, but okay.
Then you actually end up destroying the very fundamental basis of society that allows for the growing and building of a society beyond the leftist principles.
I generally agree with what Ben's saying. I feel like he's dancing around it. I think that men need a person, but in the general case, men need a good woman to keep them in control, to keep their shit together. I think that men, I'm a man, I'm cool, I'm vibing. But there are certain issues with men where they will just do too much. They will try to fuck too much. They will prioritize the wrong things in their life. They're fucking dogs. They're animals. And I feel like a good woman will keep your ass in line a little bit. Like, without my wife, I'm a fucking dog. Like, if I wasn't married right now, I would just be fucking hitting on girls on Tinder, and I'd probably, like, that's it. I wouldn't give a shit. I'd be just fucking around. I wouldn't be nearly as successful as I am. I would just be fucking slanging hams, I feel like guys need a little bit of regulation. I agree with that. I don't think you need marriage for that necessarily, but I generally agree with that.
My answer to Pearl is both and. But yes, get married, and also we should work to change those laws.
And also eat
poop.
But
by the way, the way that we date has an effect on how we get married and who we get married to.
Sure.
And when I dated my wife, we went in knowing, as we began to date, that we were not going to sleep together until we were married.
Okay.
We knew for a fact that we were going to have
Sorry. That's just real. I genuinely just, I mean, listen, if it works for you, it works for you. Personally, I recommend against it. I think that sexual compatibility is massive. Sexual compatibility is huge. If you, at least for me, if you don't have sexual compatibility with your partner, you're probably going to be miserable, because that's a big deal. So I think it's a huge deal. You want to be on the same page when it comes to cum. You do you. If you don't want to get, that's fine. Whatever, Ben. But especially if you're somebody with a high sex drive, where sex is important, which it is to me, that compatibility is very important to the relationship.
long conversations about things that matter. And this is, by the way, the best available data suggests that this is how you end up with a tangible, durable marriage that lasts a very long time. Is that everybody has to be committed going in. That value, when you put values at the center of dating, that obviously doesn't mean that you're going to be impervious to the possibility of divorce, but it does mean that your chances of divorce are really a lot lower, a lot lower.
Sure.
Now, I don't want to rip on Pearl here, and I don't think I am ripping on Pearl, frankly. But there are a bunch of other people who are making similar claims. So, for example, Brian Atlas was on the Whatever podcast, and here he was talking about marriage.
Would you consider
another unmarried person talking about marriage? What the fuck?
prenup?
Prenups are regularly thrown out all the time.
Is that true? I thought prenups were mostly enforced. A prenup is valid and it can be enforced as long as it protects both you and the spouse. I don't think that that's true. How often is how often are prenups thrown out? I feel like that's not true. There is no data that exists to say the number of prenups that are thrown out. Apparently, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so apparently, from what I'm seeing, there's no actual data to know how much prenups are thrown out. This person is just being stupid and saying things. My understanding, because I watched that entire conversation in the Soft White Underbelly with that really interesting divorce lawyer. When it comes to prenuptial agreements, they're more complicated, right? A prenuptial agreement is about the money that is made before the marriage. If you engage in a prenuptial agreement, just as generally speaking, and you make most of your money while you're married, that's not off limits. That money is both of yours because you got it together. You guys were building together. One of you may have been working, the other one might have been staying home, but that is still the relationship contract. So I don't think it's ever thrown out. It's just not like this end all be all. Like most people are like thinking that they'll be able to get into a fucking relationship as a man or as a person with somebody where like their net worth together is $3,000, and then they'll be able to get $1 million net worth and go like, all right, I'm taking most of it back. I'm gonna get 90% of that as the guy. No.
They're typically non-enforceable, especially the longer the marriage goes on, the less likely they are to be enforced. Men get absolutely destroyed in marriage and in divorce.
How? In what way? Men tend to do better after the marriage is over, like financially. How do they get destroyed?
Financially, when it comes to the kids, women are more likely to get custody.
Absolutely. But if a guy fights for it, they'll get custody, a much higher chance, and they still get to see their kids. But okay. And they don't even have to really raise their kids as much. If anything, you could argue that some guys would be like, oh, cool, I don't really have to raise my kid and I still get to be the father. Like, great.
And then also, if you do get a divorce, the financial cost of just getting the attorney, getting all that involved. If it's a contested divorce, you're going to spend mid 5 figures, 6 figures on attorneys. And you got to pay for her attorney too. 50% of marriages.
Well, most of the time you'll usually end before you get to that point. You'll usually come to an agreement so things don't get out of hand, but okay.
End in divorce. 80% of divorces are initiated by women too. 50% spend mid 5 figures, 6 figures on attorneys, and you got to pay for her attorney too. 50% of marriages,
unless she makes more money,
end in divorce. 80% of divorces are initiated by women. 90% if she's college educated. 90% of child support payments go from men to women. 97% of alimony payments go from men to women. You know, you have NoFault Divorce, so a woman can cheat on you. She can still get half her shit.
My favorite thing about this is that this is made to be the TikTok clip, just so people know that. This whole thing is like, hey, I'm going to set up a thing today where I'm going to ramble. I'm going to start yapping so that I can make a clip for TikTok. That's what this entire thing is. He's just going through bullet points that are easily contestable, which I already contested before about like women engaging in divorce. It doesn't mean that it's the woman's fault. It's usually like women are doing the lion's share of work in the household. So that's why they're going to want to get divorced. If I was a dude and I was in a miserable marriage with somebody, but they were doing all the cooking and cleaning and taking care of the kids and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, no shit. I'm not going to be the one to initiate the fucking divorce because I'm already set. I might as well just go cheat on my wife. I don't really give a shit anyway. That's how guys are thinking. Where if it's a woman, it's a much more complicated issue.
Okay. Again, a lot of what he's saying is true. The stats on marriage are not completely true. I'll go through those in just 1 second. Again, the rip on the divorce law is a good rip. It is a fine rip. And the answer is not for men to avoid marriage. The answer is for men to find a good woman to get married to who is committed to values. Yes, of course, marriage is a risk. Of course it is. And that risk is disproportionately borne by men at this point. That is true also. But
disagree.
Is the reward worth?
I think that the risk of marriage, I don't really agree with that. What the fuck? Why is there so much shit here? I don't really agree with that. You could argue that divorce might be more difficult for men, but I feel like like a shitty marriage is worse for a woman than it is for a guy. That part I'm gonna fucking I'll live and die on. I think a shitty marriage is always going to be worse for a woman because, again, she's doing most of the shit. She's doing most of the caretaking and the raising of the family. So, of course, it's going to be worse. The guy can just step out of the relationship. He usually has less responsibilities. So, yeah, divorce might be more negative for the man, but a bad marriage is more negative for a woman.
The risk? The answer, in a huge majority of circumstances where both people are committed, like, say, share Christian values, for example, the risk is worth it.
What about Jewish values, principle. Ben? Huh?
Again, these arguments are made not just by people like this. Andrew Tate has made the same sorts of
the rapist,
arguments.
Yeah.
There's Andrew Tate talking about how men don't benefit from marriage.
I really enjoy listening to rapist sex traffickers tell me how men that aren't in relationships. I really enjoy those being the ones that give me fucking relationship advice. Thank you, Ben. Please, I thought that this was going to be Ben finally pushing back into red pill. It's him trying not to criticize literal pieces of shit. It's impressive. It's actually impressive.
I think it's a fantastic environment, and I think in an idealistic world, that's the way.
Like, honestly, with the way that Ben talks about people in the manosphere that are like Andrew Tate, for instance, which is abusive piece of shit sex trafficker. I don't even know why you don't like Steven Crowder, because I mean, by comparison, he is not even close to as bad as Andrew Tate. I don't even understand. Was it a fucking virtue signal?
It would be. I think the reason it's not happening today is that I don't think many men actually benefit from marriages or relationships anymore. Wow. And people are always going to have to require some degree of incentive. I think that we've set up the world now in a way where men are seen as worker droids. They're expected to go work all day, come home, clean up as well, share the cleaning with the woman, not have no meal prepared for them, not have any authority over the household, and just
to be clear, the way a typical relationship is going to work nowadays is both parties are going to work and then both parties are going to come home. So what he's saying is just not true. He's being stupid. Both parties are usually going to work and then they're usually going to come home. The reason why there might not be a dinner prepared is because the woman worked as well. I think women are expected to work nowadays and still do their historical, taking care of the household and whatnot in a relationship. So what he's saying is just stupid. He's just crying.
And just be a worker droid and be sad. And I don't think that many people understand that men are intrinsically wired to desire respect amongst our peers and in our environments.
Yeah, women usually don't want to have respect. They just want to get beaten and sex trafficked all day. You're right. Fucking holy fuck. This guy's so smart. I can see why people like him.
This is why CEOs work so hard, because they get respect in their company.
Right.
Okay, so
it's not because of the money or anything, but sure. Okay.
Again, I don't
CEO
disagree
Glaze.
with much of what he's saying.
Well,
but the solution,
you're a fucking idiot then.
Very often with the red pill kind of movement, the diagnosis is correct and the solution is wrong. That happens very, very often in this sort of movement. I want to talk to you about Daily Wire's most trusted privacy partner and premier sponsor.
Just ExpressVPN. This is how you can look at CP and nobody will know, guys. ExpressVPN. Beam that shit into my brain.
With Pearl in this particular clip.
Women out earning men have a hard time respecting the men they're with.
That's not true.
That's not true. I read into that data and it explains.
Is that what? Women who out earn men are disrespectful? I feel like. Listen, I don't know the statistic on it. I could see that there might be some kind of an issue where if a woman out earns a man, then maybe she wouldn't respect her husband as much. That's possible. It's also possible. Men are very egotistical creatures, and it's also possible that if a man makes less than a woman, he feels some type of way about it, and then he doesn't have he's just not being positive. He has probably not very much confidence. He's just basically mentally destroying himself, and women are going to be turned off to that, a lack of confidence. I'd argue that that's also a factor.
explained why. A lot of the time, the women reported that they were expected to be in charge of the household duties and still work a job.
Yeah.
And they had to...
Oh, come on. What percent of modern women actually cook? I'm just saying this shit's automated nowadays. I mean, you have a
What is auto? What are you fucking? She's such an idiot.
washing machine, a dishwasher.
Yeah, but so you have to put it in the
You still have to load the dishwasher. I don't understand. Okay.
But as much as it's automated, men still don't do it.
True. Like even in my relationship, my wife and I have excellent communication skills, and one of the things that I'm trying to do more, my wife does the lion's share of the housework. Don't hurt me. My wife does the lion's share of the housework. Not the lion's share. She does more of the housework than I do. Let me actually put it like that. And it's always going to be like that. And my wife's okay with that. But I've been trying to contribute more. So I've been doing the dishes more. I've been cooking more. My meals aren't as complicated as hers, but making the effort, doing more chores around the house. I cleaned the microwave today. I unloaded the dishwasher. We've been trying to make sure that we keep the dishwasher loaded. Like we put stuff in it throughout the week instead of like leaving it in the sink. So I've been trying to be better, because like that's something that happens. It's somewhat typical for a woman to take on more in the household. And I think that, my wife's been conditioned to do that, which is great for me because I don't like doing housework. But men like step up a little more. And when it comes down to it, it's not even that my wife is asking for help. It's that I'm noticing that I'm not contributing as much. And I'll notice my wife get frustrated, and I don't want my wife to leave me. So I go, hey, like, is there things you want me to do around the house? And then I make her write me a list of things that she wants me doing in the house. Because I just like, because that's one of the things too. I feel like one thing that bothers women, and it bothers my wife, but she's gonna have to deal with it because I'm probably not gonna change too much, is that like I don't do things, I don't notice things around the house. I'm not looking around the house like this needs to be cleaned. I'm just fucking like my eyes are fucking might as well be closed. If I'm getting up to get a drink of water, nothing exists around that except for the water, right? So I have to tell her, I said, listen, I'm probably never going to be like super identifying what's going on around the house. So just write down what you want me to do. Right? So that is something that's definitely happening.
They still don't do it. That's the issue. Is that one of the big problems with households
for divorce?
It absolutely is a reason. When you get older and you manage a household on your own, Pearl, you'll see how fucking annoying it is when you're working and then you come home and everything is fucked up and horrible and nobody's fucking cleaning anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I used to be in a relationship with somebody, and I was the one working like 40 hours. Like I was working more than 40 hours a week to pay for everything, and then she wouldn't cook, clean, or do anything at all, and it was frustrating. Like you build resentment over those everyday tasks. That's why people are like, it's always the little things that people notice. It is the little things that people will notice. Like those things matter a lot. The housework is going to be like those things around the house. Those are your everyday tasks that are going on people are picking up on. Of course.
That is a totally valid reason for divorce, of course.
Chores, to break up a home,
Pearl,
a family.
Have you lived in a filthy home before? Like, it's so funny because like lifelong.
Yeah, like not doing chores, not doing the dishes means that there are going to be roaches in your house. Like I think that she's just a fucking moron.
Friends from like grade school to high school will dorm in college and then hate each other forever over like bad dorm roommates, and that's not even a relationship. So yeah, of course I think stuff like this is perfectly valid. I think splitting up duties in the household is like one of the most important parts of like a relationship because it's where you're spending most of the time together. This is why I say people get triggered when I say it. I don't think you're even dating until you live together, because until you live together, you don't really know who the other person
the fuck is triggered by that.
Like, and once you start living together and you see what the household duties are like, then you get a feel for what the relationship is.
True.
So what Destiny is saying here is totally crazy. Okay, the idea that you get
what are you? It's not crazy at all. I forgot. Ben only dated one. Ben literally dated one girl and had sex with one girl and married her. He was never anybody that's going to engage in the dating market in a way where he actually has to find somebody, right? That in any long-term capacity. This is 1,000% true. You're not really going to know somebody if you're engaging in modern dating rituals, which is not, less within proximity of some kind of arranged marriage. Then yes, this is absolutely the way that these things work. 100%. This is the way that these things work. You're going to build insane amounts of resentment. Like Ben just is completely inexperienced when it comes to shit like this in the real world because he didn't date in any robust capacity. It's cool for him. He came from a very religious background. She probably does most of the housework anyway. And like it's not something that's really an issue in his sphere. In most people's sphere, this is a huge thing. What are you talking about?
Get divorced. Let's say you have kids. You get divorced because you can't split up who handles the dishwasher.
It's so much more complicated than that. If you think it's not that. It's usually the woman or one of the partners is like, I really need help doing it. It's the woman goes to work and comes home and has to do all the fucking housework and raise the kids and do like the lion's share of that. And the guy is just being fucking ignorant, not caring, and not really contributing. That's what it comes down to. It's a building up of resentment. Like, it's a constant struggle. It's people getting too comfortable and not caring that much. Because women care more about the cleanliness of a house than a man, generally speaking. Like, what's considered dirty or unlivable to my wife is on a higher standard than for me. I don't really give a fuck, right? So when stuff starts going shit around the house, it's going to be something that bothers my wife first. And I'm like, whatever, I don't care. I can live in a cluttered mess. I just don't give a shit. Like, I think men are more like that and women care more. So the threshold has been hit for my wife and she wants things to change. And since I'm apathetic about it because I don't have the same desire or passion to clean to the same degree she does with the same standard she does, she's cleaning more. And when she asks me to do anything, it's not as important to me because I don't really see it as a problem, right? That's usually how men are operating. And then like, it's just a process of like that's why I have my wife write shit down. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Of course, this is what's going to be happening. No shit. You know, if you live in a household where the man works and the woman doesn't, like, that's different. She can take care of all the shit. But most people are living in a 2-income household. So it's much more complicated than, oh, you're not doing the dishwasher. No, it's the dishes, it's the laundry, it's sweeping, it's vacuuming, it's clearing, it's doing like it's just moving the clothes from like not around the house because dudes will take off their fucking shirt and just throw it somewhere. It's a real thing. It's a lot of different. It's taking care of the kids to what degree, how much attention you're giving to the kids. There's a lot that goes into it.
Is nuts. And comparing marriage to roommates, college roommates, yes, because you don't expect to be roommates with your roommate for the rest of your life and have children with them, generally speaking.
What?
A marriage is not supposed to be a contractual arrangement that is purely about who shares household duties. It's supposed to be about building a household. So it's that attitude.
Yeah, and a part of building a household is about the duties of the household. I think that's why you said that really quick and you moved on because you knew that it was a huge part of it and you just realized it.
For divorce that is making the red pill crew basically say, okay, well, if that's your version of marriage, then I'm not in. I agree. If that were my version of marriage, I would not be in. The point that I'm making is that shouldn't be anybody's version of marriage.
What?
Just like the current version of divorce shouldn't be anybody's version of divorce. And I want to give you some stats that demonstrate that not all marriages are created equal. Not all predicates for marriage are the same.
Okay.
So Brad Wilcox, who is a social science scholar on all of this, he has a book called Get Married, and it's all about marriage and divorce. And here are some of the facts in that book that are well substantiated by the data. The number one factor in predicting a high-quality marriage is perceived partner commitment. If you believe
that makes perfect sense. Correctly splitting chores is going to be a perception of commitment, right? In some commitment, I would argue.
That your partner is deeply committed to the marriage, you will be deeply committed to the marriage.
Sure.
Which is one of the reasons why it really matters how you date. It really, really matters how you date.
Okay,
so I agree that in a context where you're picking up a girl at a bar and then you live together and then you get married to her, that's a very risky situation. You put yourself in a situation that is very risky. But that is not how I've ever recommended dating. That is not ever how I've recommended getting married. It is all part of a holistic view of how male-female relationships work. If you just take marriage as
I don't think it has to go that deep, but like you have to take it seriously. And a lot of it comes down to respecting your partner and boundaries and all that other fucking garbage. So.
Institution. And you just throw it out there. And however you date is supposed to be equivalent. That, of course, is not true.
What?
Women who attend church are 50% less likely to divorce. For example, so when you heard Pearl earlier talk about, for example,
and then you have to be a fucking nerd that's part of the church. I mean, that's cool. I understand. Like, marriage means more to those people. So, in the church, you're okay with being less happy in your life and staying in a marriage you may not be as happy with. It's a reality, and that's cool. But most people aren't religious. So that's what you're saying. Hey, just go be religious. You can't force faith onto people.
I've seen Christian women do. I've seen Muslim women. Yes, but the question is likelihood. You can always find somebody in any group who does X, Y, or Z. The question is, how often does that happen? How do you mitigate your risk? As far as the stat that 50% of marriage,
you just have to date a self-conscious girl, marry her because she won't let you. She won't leave you. There you go. Statistically speaking, the more self-conscious and self-loathing a girl is, the more likely she is to not leave you. Okay.
Marriages end in divorce. Just about 40% right now of first marriages end in divorce, which is way, way too high. It's also down significantly since the 1980s. But again, it's not equivalent between groups.
Oh, so it's down since the 1980s. It sounds like we've been getting less religious since then. So it sounds like religion isn't the end all be all, huh?
College-educated parents' risk of divorce has fallen by about 25% since the 1970s. And here's a good stat. Almost 90% of their children for college-educated parents are being raised in married, largely intact families today. So it turns out that there is actually a formula to a successful marriage. It tends to be conservative, religious, highly educated.
Wasn't he saying before that women that will engage in a higher level of divorce if they're highly educated, which is true, but then they also have better marriages overall. So that's interesting.
Those would be like the biggest things that are going to affect whether you end up staying married or whether you end up divorced. By the way, another factor that ends up determining whether you stay married or end up divorced is, again, about the nature of the marriage. Do you have kids? Marriages with kids divorce far less often than marriages without kids. In fact, the divorce rate for couples with kids is about 40% lower than the divorce rate for couples without kids, which makes sense because you have less investment. Once you have kids, then actually it damages another party for you to get divorced over the dishwasher.
Again, it's not just like the dishwasher. It's one of those things where it's difficult to communicate to somebody who's, I guess, doesn't live the experience or he's oblivious to it. I don't know what his life is like at home if his wife is dealing with more bullshit. But it's hard to communicate this. It's hard to communicate like, yeah, it's not just, you didn't do the dishes today. It's a constant pattern of your partner not respecting you. That's what it comes down to. It really is a matter of respect. When you come home, and when you both work 40 hours a week and you both come home and you're expected to cook and you're expected to clean and you're expected to do most of the stuff and you ask your partner for help and they ignore you and they don't care, that's them communicating a lack of respect. That's what it boils down to. They're not showing a commitment to the relationship because they're not helping. They're not keeping the space that you live in clean. They're not respecting you in the way that like of helping. They're not respecting your advocation for help to create an environment that's better for both of them, because that's the thing. And they're still benefiting from the cleanliness because the guy's benefiting from the woman cleaning the house. It's not like, oh, it's just such a small thing. It's a pretty big thing. It's like a huge thing.
And then somebody else pays for your crimes at that point. 77% of college-educated conservative parents are still in their first marriage. So are 70% of moderates and 68% of liberals.
Cool.
And again, the number of newly divorced people per 1,000 married Americans has declined pretty markedly since the 80s. It was 22.6 in 1980. It is 13.6 today in 2021.
What is it?
And so are 70% of moderates and 68% of liberals. And again, the number of newly divorced people per 1,000 married Americans has declined pretty markedly since the 80s. It was 22.6 in 1980. It is 13.6 today in 2021.
Okay.
As far as the notion that it's like damaging financially for men to get married, no, it's damaging for men to get divorced. It's not damaging for men to get married.
Sure.
Married men in their 30s earn about $95,000. If they're cohabiting, they earn about $68,000. If they're single, they earn about $42,000. The average marriage premium in household assets is more than $290,000 for a stably married man. So, again, I think what people are actually arguing about over here, to be fair to the Red Pill crew, I think what they're actually arguing about is divorce. And so the question is, are you more likely to stay married or are you more likely to end up in a divorce situation? And that is a fair question depending on the process that you use for dating, in the cultural milieu in which you live. In the community where I live, an Orthodox Jewish community, not a lot of divorce. Like very, very low divorce rates. Why? Well, because everyone is religiously committed. Because everybody goes into marriage believing it is a sacred bond that actually matters. Because people don't date for sex. People actually date looking forward to the day when they will have kids together. Because every family in my neighborhood has 4+ kids. Those are the preconditions. But if the idea here is that your basic binary is, are you going to be married or divorced? Divorced is typically worse than never married. And married is way better than both divorced and never married. And so, yeah, it's a risk. But is it a coin flip? I don't think it's a coin flip. I think it is a decision that you have to make as to what kind of person you wish to date, how you wish to date that person, what kind of relationship you wish to build, and how seriously you take that commitment.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The thing is that the people in the Red Pill, they're not looking to develop equal, respectful marriages. They're literally just looking for a servant that they can be with and do all the things for them and act like fucking babies.
In the first
place. They want their fucking, if they could, they would ask for their fucking spouse to wipe their asshole. They're losers. That the people in the Red Pill are like loser men that aren't even men, that fucking pray to their deity Andrew Tate of rape, sex trafficking. And they demand that you do everything for them because they're fucking babies that don't have any levels of responsibility.
Place. Do the laws need to change? Absolutely, and they need to change. They're garbage.
In what
I
way?
totally agree with that. It is easy for men to be victimized under these circumstances. It's so easy that you should not enter the risk. Let's look at some of the upsides and the downsides. Here's a chart from Brad about opioid overdose deaths by gender, educational attainment, and marital status. And what you see is that among men, if you are single, never married,
Among us?
what you see is that the opioid overdoses per 100,000 age 25 plus, it's like 25 for single, never married men. It is even higher for divorced men. And it is extremely low for married men. Really, really low for married men. And
Cool beans.
again, are you going to be one of the people who gets divorced or not? One of the things you can know going in is
No.
you will never get divorced. And then you have to make sure that you marry a woman.
I feel like one of the biggest things is that if you know that you're unhappy in your relationship, don't get married. I feel like there is a pressure in society nowadays that says you need to get married to people and you need to be with somebody and this way, and it makes people get like pull the trigger on a relationship that they're probably not that happy in. It's not normal to be miserable with your partner. Don't stay with somebody because you're miserable. There's a difference between making like compromises, because there's going to be some things that you're always compromising on, versus being upset. Like there's nothing in my marriage that makes me feel wanting. But there's of course aspects of the marriage aspects that we probably want to improve between the two of us, sure. But you should never be like wanting. That's a big thing.
Never gets divorced. And we can't pretend that divorce sort of falls on you like rain from the heavens. That's not right. The person this is why I give dating advice all the time. My number one dating advice: date for values. Date for values. In the end, that's the only thing that's going to remain. Are you tired of the lies and the twist of the mainstream?
Totally. Thank you, Ben. All right, enough of that. It's fucking torture.